Dad recognizes baby's face in ultrasound, learns mom lied. The couple couldn't believe what they were looking at. After 6 years of trying they finally got pregnant, but there was more to it than that. Angelo knew that he should have been happy at that moment. But as he looked at the ultrasound, he knew nothing would be the same again. Angelo and Katie were both in their last year of college when they met each other. It was love at first sight and within 2 years they were happily married. Next came children and years later they had Brandon and then Taylor. But they also wanted a girl, so for the next 4 years, they tried desperately to get pregnant again. Angelo and Katie lived together in Orange County, California. They both had good jobs in a great area. You'd think then that life would be good for them, but there were complications. Angelo was happy with 2 boys, he knew his wife wanted more, but if they ended up only with their 2 miracles, he would be alright. But it was a much bigger deal for Katie. Katie was getting more and more depressed over the course of 4 years. In all that time she had been trying to have a baby girl, but couldn't even get pregnant at all. Something wasn't right. She decided to get to the bottom of it by getting a checkup. Angelo was also convinced to get a checkup as well as unenthusiastic as he was. The doctor told them both that they were fine. He didn't think it would ever happen. After 6 years of trying Katie finally found out that she was pregnant. Angelo couldn't believe it. How was it possible? They were over the moon, even if it was a shock to the both of them, their relationship really needed this. It had been slowly crumbling before this point. Katie was very careful with the pregnancy now that she was given another chance of having a girl. She went to every scheduled appointment with her doctor and read dozens of books on the topic. Now her baby a reality she swore to protect them above all else. But she would soon find out that her pregnancy had a surprise or two. But at her most recent appointment, she could tell her doctor saw something that concerned him. He wouldn't tell her what was wrong, but told her to head to a specialist just 1 week later. Angelo comforted his wife and told her that he would come with her. She smiled and nodded her head. She felt so much better having him come with her. But if she had known how things would end, she wouldn't have wanted him along at all. Angelo waited anxiously for the doctor to explain what was happening. He propped Katie up on the bed, preparing her for the ultrasound. "It'd be better if I showed you, instead of telling you." With that, he turned on the screen and pointed at the screen. "There," he said. Suddenly, Angelo realized something was seriously wrong. "Do you see that tiny face? You're having twins," he happily said. "A boy and a girl." Katie couldn't believe it. She gasped loudly before bringing her hands up to her face and crying tears of immense joy. But for Angelo, his whole world suddenly fell upside down. His heart pounded violently. He looked at Katie in shock and stormed out of the room. As soon as Angelo recognized another face and the doctor told him there was not only one boy which they had assumed, but a girl as well, he knew foul play was involved. What Katie didn't know was that Angelo lied to her. When he went to that medical checkup 2 years ago, he was told that the likelihood of him becoming a father again was very low. And that he had a rare condition. Angelo's hard-hitting realization had dawned on him slowly at first, but as he stood looking at the ultrasound everything came crashing down. He replayed his life with Katie and looked at every detail with fresh eyes. He remembered times when her behavior, in retrospect, should have set off alarm bells. He felt sick. This could not be happening. Had there been a scandal going on right under his own roof? If there had been, Angelo had been too blind to notice. After all, he worked late most nights, too. He hadn't batted an eyelid when Katie called him late one night from a hotel in London to tell him that her flight had been delayed. Angelo snorted in disgust. It was a work trip she had said. But there were other details emerging that he hadn't thought much of until now. In the general population, identical twin pregnancies occur 0.45% of the time, or 1 in 250 births. People who are twins tend to conceive twins. And it's also a well-known fact that using fertility treatments increases the likelihood of having twins. Had Katie realized that they were having fertility problems because of him and done something about it? After all, they had been trying for 6 years when Katie finally fell pregnant again. And then, there was his family's curse. Angelo always knew he could only have baby boys. It ran in his family. His father, his father's father, and even his father before that had all only produced boys. From a scientific standpoint though, he was lucky that he already had 2 kids with his condition. Angelo hadn't told Katie the truth. He had been terrified that she'd ended and their family would be left broken. But those babies weren't his. He began to shake. When Angelo had gone to see the doctor 2 years prior, his world had come crashing down. When the question of fertility came up, the doctor explained that he had an extremely low sperm count and that further tests would need to be done to determine why. After hormone testing and a chromosome analysis, the results stunned even the doctor. Now that Angelo had the results, everything started to make sense. In a follow-up appointment, the doctor explained that people with his extremely rare condition very rarely conceive children. Angelo remembered his struggles as a child. He was always sick, anxious, and had difficulty concentrating in school. Now, he knew why. And he was slowly coming to grips with his disease at the worst time possible. Angelo had Klinefelter syndrome, an extremely rare genetic disorder that meant he had an extra chromosome. Humans have 46 chromosomes, including 2 sex chromosomes that determine their sex. Women have 2 X chromosomes, XX, and men have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, XY. Angelo had one extra copy of the X chromosome, which meant he was XXY. But what did this mean for him? Because Angelo was born with an extra copy of the genes on the X chromosome, the doctor was 99% sure that he couldn't have any more children. It had gone undiagnosed his whole life. In fact, it was a miracle that he had previously conceived not 1, but 2 kids. So then, how was his wife now pregnant? He was livid. When he found out that Katie was pregnant, he was shocked because he knew how unlikely it was. He assumed it was a boy, but when he found out they were having twins, one being a girl, he knew for certain. There was no way those babies were his. He kept his silence until the kids were born. Then he did something drastic. As soon as the babies were born, he asked Katie to do a DNA test on the twins. Immediately, her face went pale. She quickly recovered and asked him if he was accusing her of something. But she couldn't fool him. Before the couple left the hospital with the twins, Angelo asked the doctor to do a DNA test. As a married parent sharing equal custody of his so-called twins, he had every right. It took 2 weeks for the results to come back. During that time, Angelo told Katie that he was leaving her. Katie was left stunned when he finally told her the truth about his test results from the medical checkup 2 years ago. He told her what the doctor told him. Katie stood frozen. Would she confess? Of course the twins are yours. No matter what the science says. Katie said. Angelo was incredulous. He couldn't believe that she was flat out denying everything. Okay, he thought. If Katie wanted to play hardball, he could play. He couldn't be with a woman who had cheated on him, so he filed for a divorce. Katie didn't know what to say. She couldn't believe what had happened. Now, they were living separately and preparing to go through with a divorce. That's when the DNA results came back. Just as Angelo suspected, the twins weren't his. He confronted Katie, angrily demanding an explanation. Then, she finally cracked. Katie admitted that she had been seeing another man throughout their marriage, and to add insult to injury, Angelo had even met him in passing. The man worked with her and even traveled abroad with her for work meetings. So then, the chances that the 2 other medical miracle sons were actually his were almost zero. What could he do? Angelo decided to seek out advice from a lawyer. After undergoing a battery of tests, it was confirmed that he was indeed incapable of fathering children. The next step was to obtain DNA samples from his other 2 sons. Angelo believed that children define who you are. So, not only had he been diagnosed with a rare disease, but he now suspected that he didn't actually have any children.